Hi there, I'm Robert Tercek, and I'm the author of a book called Vaporized. And Vaporized is the definitive history of the rise of the mobile information empires. And the book talks all about how it came to be that a handful of technology companies grew to be the richest and most powerful companies on Earth. And that process took place over about a 20-year period. It didn't happen overnight. And in the process, we literally vaporized physical products. So as the whole world migrated to internet connections through smartphones and mobile devices, we began to replace the purchase of physical items with the downloading of mobile apps on our devices that gave us similar functionality. And it made it possible for us to simply replace buying physical things by downloading over the air. Hence the term vaporize. We literally made things disappear, physical products, and that includes almost every type of media, whether it was a CD or a DVD disc or a book, but also some consumer electronics products and a number of other things. That process, as I say, took more than a decade, took almost 20 years, but at the end of it, companies like Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft emerged as the largest and most powerful and richest companies on the planet Earth. And now the whole world wants to know what's next. The whole world's waiting to find out, how will this process unfold in the future? And I have some thoughts for you about that today. Everyone realizes that we're at the brink of some kind of transformation. The technology world, the internet technology world, telecommunications world, tends to go through a platform shift every 10 years or so. And we seem to have reached the zenith of the mobile revolution in the sense that most people today on the planet, about 6 billion people today, have a smartphone. And they're already well ensconced in that virtual world, that vaporized world of apps and mobile content. And so we've kind of conditioned the entire world to that process. There's still some room for growth, but it's also quite evident now that these globe-spanning information empires have reached their zenith. And the question is, where will they go next? Now, if those companies have their way, they're going to continue to consolidate and acquire and merge into other industries. And already they have industries like healthcare, education, and other fields, finance, in mind. And they're making inroads into all those fields. So one possible future is super apps. The companies that consolidate everything in the mobile world will continue to grow and build their information empires. That's one possible path. But there's an alternative path, which is towards decentralization. And that's a reaction against the great centralization or consolidation that has occurred in the mobile app industry over the past 10 years. But there's one other path, and this is the one we want to talk about today. It's the rise of immersive, real-time, interactive 3D worlds, otherwise known as the Metaverse. And I want to get into the Metaverse because some of the ideas that I've heard floating around in the last year or so seem to me to be missing some of the key ingredients for success. Namely, most of the Metaverse concepts that we've heard about so far come from a single company, and they describe a single destination, an immersive world, something like the immersive game worlds that already exist today. So we're quite familiar with that concept. You go to a destination, you get into it, and you're in a 3D world. And that's what's being proposed by a lot of the companies that are talking about the Metaverse. In my mind, these folks are thinking way too small. Most of the concepts we've seen so far about immersive 3D worlds or metaverses involve something like a collaborative workspace, a virtual office environment, or some sort of shopping mall, or some sort of virtual playground where you can hang out with your friends and socialize. And these have direct analogs to the real world in the form of a corporate office campus, or a shopping center, or a theme park. And if you'll notice, all three of those examples are conditioned on one type of user activity, which is commerce. Those worlds are optimized for commerce and for transactions. These are commercial enterprises. In my view, that's way too limited of a vision. It's going to be very difficult to sustain that over time, to keep people interested. It might have some novelty value in the beginning, but if you want to get people to come back and participate in a meaningful way over the long term, you're going to have to think much, much bigger. You're going to have to begin to think about, how do we incorporate those users in a meaningful way where they get value out of the system, where they get some value from the things they contribute and the things they build. And bear in mind, what's being discussed here isn't a social network. It's not something like an online utility service or some kind of collaboration tool. We're talking about building entire worlds That's going to take a heroic effort from an awful lot of people, more than the people that are on your payroll. It's going to require an enormous number of people volunteering their time and energy to build out those worlds and to populate them with objects and with items. That's a major undertaking. And bear in mind, it's also going to require enormous investment in infrastructure. Right now, we don't have enough processing power to process or to manage millions of worlds. And that's how I envision it. I do believe there are going to be millions of worlds in the metaverse, not a single one, but multiple. And so there's going to be a big investment on the part of private companies to build out the infrastructure to host and manage and run these businesses. But there needs to be an equal commitment to creating incentives for participation. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to pay people to participate in your metaverse, but you do need to create some situation where they get value out of it, where they're rewarded for the time, energy, and effort that they put into building out the world with you. And there must be a suite of tools that are accessible to everyone. And these tools have to be something that don't require expert skills. Today, to build a 3D world, you need to be a developer and you need to be quite adept in using 3D tools. Well, that's a bar that's too high for most people. If we want these immersive worlds to be successful and to be populated by millions and millions of people, hundreds of millions, billions perhaps, we're going to need to make the barrier to entry very, very low. And so what I envision is a process of co-creation or collaboration, where the host, or the creator, the company that's introducing this virtual world, offers a suite of tools that are accessible to everyone, so that everybody can participate in creating, building, contributing to the creation of this world. To me, it's an effort of that scale that's going to be required to make a really true world. Otherwise, all we're really going to have is a 3D chat room or maybe a 3D shopping mall. Again, something that's small scale and enabled for commerce, but something that I don't think is going to have a lot of durability or longevity. If you really want to make this world last long and attract people on a regular basis, you're going to need to involve them in some way. Now, here's a problem. Our current social networks, where people do create and contribute, don't have any concept of rewarding people for their time and the energy that they invest. In fact, in a way, you could say that they exploit people. They give us a platform to share ideas and to link up with our friends and so forth. But the companies that run those services extract the data that we contribute, and they extract data about our behavior, and they commercialize that data. They don't really share the benefit back to the user. Now, perhaps it's too late to solve that problem in social media. Maybe we can't solve that at all. Maybe that's just a built-in feature of social media, but it doesn't need to be that way in the metaverse. We don't need to replicate that error, that blunder in the metaverse. In the metaverse, it'll be possible for us to create an incentive program that rewards people for their contribution, rewards people for good behavior, for doing the right things to build out those worlds. It gives them proper incentives and proper rewards. So I believe that companies, as they start to investigate and think about building out a metaverse, if you're going to devote time to thinking about the architecture of this world and the immense amount of infrastructure that needs to be built, you should devote at least as much time into thinking about governance, the rules that involve people. You see, today, in a way, we can make an analogy to the past. In the past, the way international commerce grew was through colonialism. And today, we live with the artifacts of colonialism every single day. A lot of us don't think about it. We're not really consciously aware of it. But even after the colonial period has mostly, largely, not completely, come to an end, we're still left with the relics and artifacts of the colonial era. If you think I'm exaggerating, just consider the US Constitution as an example. This Constitution was written in direct relation to the colonial system. Those colonial concepts are baked into our Constitution. And that's not just true in the United States, that's true with every company that went through a process of decolonialism, the process of unbundling or decoupling from a colonial empire. Those artifacts exist in almost every aspect of our lives, but we tend not to think about them. We tend to be unaware or unconscious of them. Artifacts of colonialism exist still to this day. They persist in our legal system, in law enforcement, in the rights and the obligations, in our constitutions. They also exist in our education system, and they exist in our economic systems. Now, there's an entire field of study devoted to this concept of surfacing these unconscious concepts and bringing them to the attention of everyone so that we can address them. And I think there's real relevance and a lot to be learned from the people who are designing metaverses to pay attention to coloniality and this concept of decoloniality. How do we remove these artifacts of the colonial era that still persist to this day? What I'm saying here is that I think it would be a mistake for us to unconsciously march into this new world, sleepwalk into the 3D world, and carry the artifacts of the colonial period with us. That would be a gigantic blunder. It would be a huge missed opportunity. One of the characteristics of the colonial era is that colonies were designed to be exploited. Resources were extracted from colonies, and the value was taken away and sent back to what was called the metropole, the center, usually the center of an empire, of a globe-spanning empire. Now, you'll notice earlier in my comments, I talked about information empires, and I do see a direct correlation there today, because I do believe that there's some element of a colonial approach when we think about how artificial intelligence works and how data is gathered from populations all over the world. Those populations aren't treated like citizens. Those populations are treated like subjects of an information empire. Do we really want to extend that and keep that going in the 3D world? Or is this an opportunity for us to make a radical break from the past, examine those colonial artifacts, and discard those that no longer serve us? I think this is an important call to action. I think every company that's contemplating building a metaverse needs to consider, do we want to treat the people in the metaverse, the people that participate in co-creating these worlds, do we want to treat them like citizens, or do we want to treat them like subjects? If we want to treat them like citizens, then your metaverse has to come with a Bill of Rights. It has to come with some sense of the rights of the participants and the obligations and their ability to rectify situations that they don't like. There has to be some right of appeal. There has to be some meaningful engagement in the governance of these worlds by the people who participate in them. All of these concepts are missing today from social media. Do we really want to carry that mistake forward into the 3D worlds that we're building? I would certainly hope we don't do that mistake. And don't think I'm suggesting that you should do this for altruistic reasons. I understand private corporations are going to make an enormous investment in the metaverse for a return. They're not doing it for charity. They're not doing it necessarily for good. They're doing it because they believe this is a smart business move. But if you build a world that exploits people, takes advantage of people, that does not give them the right to say how they're governed, to speak up, and a right of appeal, to change the way things are governed, a right of ownership so that when they create something, they have a stake in whatever they've created, a right to sell things and a way to get remunerated for the content and the ideas and the 3D objects that they build. If you are to build a world that does not incorporate those concepts, your world will be vacant. It won't be populated. People won't come back and your investment will be lost. So I'm appealing to your enlightened sense of thinking about the future, of thinking about your business, and thinking about your own self-interest. For these reasons, and of course, for all the right reasons, let's think about a metaverse that creates a sense of citizenship. Citizens of a 3D world. Well, thanks for hearing me out. I hope you like this concept. I hope you'll appreciate it. And I certainly would love to continue this conversation with anyone who wants to build a 3D world that incorporates all of us, invites all of us to participate and co-create together. I'm Rob Tercek, and thanks for listening.